Hello everybody, good evening and welcome. My name is Maria Fusco. I'm Professor of Interdisciplinary Writing at Duncan of Jordanstone College of Art and Design in Dundee in Scotland. I'm very pleased to be able to welcome you to the second of our talks this week, which is part of a series called Everything Interesting Begins with One Person in One Place, which is a quote that I have borrowed from Irish author John McGahern. This series of talks is programmed by myself really to celebrate the huge achievements of our graduating master's students from across a range of courses. So without further ado, I will say hello to Irini Papadimitriou, who I'm really pleased is joining us tonight. And Irini's presentation will be chaired and the Q&A afterwards will also be chaired by Mel Woods, who is one of my very esteemed colleagues in Dundee. Mel is Professor of Creative Intelligence. So over to you, Mel.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome. Good evening, everybody, to the second of the series of talks tonight. So I'm welcoming, on behalf of Duncan of Jordanstone and the University of Dundee, Irini Papadimitriou. So thank you, Irini, for accepting the invitation to speak to us this evening and for responding to Maria's suggestion. By way of introduction, Irini is currently Creative Director of FutureEverything in Manchester. Previous to that, she was at V&A in London, and she has an interdisciplinary curation thinking practice around critical discourse to explore digital culture in our ever-expanding relationships with technology and the role of art in helping us engage with and navigate through contemporary issues. She's especially interested in emerging areas of technologies and inequalities and injustice and ethics and aesthetics of automation, AI and algorithmically driven processes, surveillance and control, and the public, physical and digital realms. And tonight she's going to present to us Algorithmic Anxieties, New Societies of Control. And with that introduction, I'd like to hand over to Irini. Welcome.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you, Maria, for having me here and for your kind invitation. I'm delighted to be back to University of Dundee, even virtually. So I'm just going to share my screen and start. Hoping that everybody can see my screen now. So yeah, thank you again, Mel, for your great introduction. So I'm currently based at the at FutureEverything in Manchester. We work across art, design, and technology, mainly thinking about the impact of technology in society and culture, but also through our work, we've been interrogating and thinking about and reflecting on our role as an art organization, but also the role of culture and artists in society. And a lot of our work has been taking place in the public realm. So we often collaborate with many arts organizations, but also with other sectors from local authorities, but also business and tech industry. And what I wanted to kind of touch on today is how we think about place and our interactions with place that are currently mediated by a very technologically driven society. So this is a picture of Stoa Photalos in Athens. It's very much like a stoa was this covered portico and walkway that was used for the public, for having conversations, but also for markets. And it was kind of attached to the agora that we all know about. So this idea of like public space and this openness of the public space about the discourse is something that I wanted to kind of keep there as a starting point, and then move to just something that Christoph Wojcik recently said in a symposium that was exploring public space, and he's kind of thinking about what public space is, and that it exists for everyone, for the privileged, but also the unwanted. And it's something that many artists have been exploring in terms of place and public realm and public space as well. And these kind of image instead is a visualization, is how another artist called Keiji Matsuda, British-Japanese artist, imagined a current kind of, or even slightly futuristic idea of space, of a city, with all of these layers of technological interactions that we have right now, for example, with images that we might overlay in our current like reality vision through our mobile phones, but also the these invisible layers of kind of information and data that are coming from navigation, from like services that we don't know that are happening in the background, from social media interactions, etc. So it's really interesting that his vision of like technology has all these different layers that are kind of quite far away from that first image that we started with. And something that we've been interested in is how many times artists, but also arts organizations question public spaces, but also our interactions with cities and or among ourselves and environments as well. So recently in an artwork that we produced, which was by artist Naho Matsuda, called Everything Every Time, it's just, this is an example of how we often bring art into the public space to interrogate these interactions and these invisible kind of realities and visions that happen that we don't immediately perceive. So Everything Every Time is a sculpture. It's a mechanical sculpture that is that works with data. So what that means is that the sculpture receives like data feeds from sources such as social media, but also public services, and things that happen in a place, in a town, in a city at the time when it is exhibited. So it's a site-specific artwork in a way. And what happens is that it's a mechanical split flap display, so very similar to the ones that we had at old airports or the buses, so that turn around. And with the data that it receives, it tries to create statement-like poems, creating stories that are unveiled by these data sets, as you can see here. And the work has been shown in different locations. So these, for us and for the artist, of course, has been a starting point for people, for passersby to think about what this information is, how from being invisible, it kind of comes to translate it to a language that we talk and we understand, and to start conversations about what happens to all of these layers, who controls it, and also our information that is there. And I wanted to share this quote from Charles Babbage's 1837 treatise, the 9th Bridgewater treatise, that talks about the air as this vast library where everything that has been ever said or whispered or written is stored there. So in a way, Charles Babbage was talking about something that we might kind of translate today as the cloud. So all this information, everything that we keep, that stays in a digital format. And the reason why I wanted to share this as well is that it was a starting point and an inspiration for artist Raffaello Zanohiemer in a project that took place last year in Manchester called Atmospheric Memory. And this was a large-scale installation that was co-commissioned with Manchester International Festival, the Science and Industry Museum, FutureEverything, Electro Arsenal in Montreal, and also the Carolina Performing Arts Center. And this was, for Raffaello Zanohiemer, this was a way to try and materialize that space, that invisible space, and bring the visitor, the audiences, into a vast space that was containing and bringing physically in front of them the words that they would say. So anything that would that people could speak into into mics in the space then would appear in front of you in the shape of words, but also clouds. But also the work was kind of making evident the presence of people in the space, that something in the space was aware that you were present in that space. And this kind of takes me to Borges's on exactitude in science, which is that really brief writing which Borges wrote in 1946, and he presented it as a historic travel book extract by a fictitious writer called Suarez Miranda. And it's what I find fascinating about this is how what he talks about in this writing, that there was this powerful empire that created a really advanced cartographic science, and they managed to map the whole empire in a way that the map itself became bigger than the empire, or as big as the empire itself. And it kind of for me, brings to mind our current obsession with mapping, but also with quantifying everything that surrounds us, and which goes back to a little bit to what Charles Babbage was saying, that maybe in the same treatise, that maybe one day there will be something like a machine that is powerful enough to bring back all of these words and everything that has been whispered that is currently in the air, and materialize it. And it makes me think that we are currently in this moment where we are obsessed with these ideas and archiving everything. But this is something that has been happening like for a very long time. This is a work by Athanasius Kircher from the 17th century called Statua Cytophonica, which basically shows a courtyard and also an interior like space with a statue, and the statue is connected with these kind of tunnels that go out to the courtyard and can hear anything that people say out there, and the person who is in the central room can listen to whatever everybody says outside. So again, this is a really interesting kind of parallel in terms of thinking about going back to that image that Katie Matsuda saw in our current kind of city of these layers, but taking it back to history and thinking about, you know, these ideas of like who kind of controls, who drives all these invisible layers, everything that is happening behind the scenes, and why this happens. So coming back to the 21st century and where we are at the moment, we know that we are currently surrounded by so many technologies and machines, and again, to refer to that image of Katie Matsuda, we know that everybody has mobile phones. There are services that use data, that use like personal information that are going around, and also we keep hearing the term artificial intelligence, which is a bit abstract, but also we know that is used pretty much everywhere, from our navigation systems to our kind of phone assistants, to Google searches or like online searches, etc. So there is a paradox here, and this is why I wanted to share this quote by Chris Mullerley and Susan Robertson. There is a paradox in terms of we think that all these technological tools on one hand create a very transparent and open and accessible world, but then on the other hand, we have a less visible but a still very powerful bureaucracy, like a digital bureaucracy. And this is what they are talking about here, how our world is mediated by these machines and digital interactions. And one thing that I wanted to bring up as well, and it's something that we've been exploring quite a lot at FutureEverything, especially with the recent events, which were a reminder of the injustice and in society, but also in making us think a little bit about the fact that we are not all on the same level, or we're not all visible as we might think. Is this quote by Frantz Fanon in his brilliant Black Skin, White Masks, which I'm sure most people will know about. And it's how he talks about the construction of his identity as a Black person, and the fact that this identity that is the invention of the white man, rather than something that he thinks or that he owns. And the reason why I wanted to share this is thinking about these new spaces that we create, and also how these, let's say, if we're going to call them public spaces, how these structures that we create are made, and who kind of who guides them, and who constructs them, and for what reason, and also whose lives are affected. One thing to is the art of physiognomy, which is quite old. It's actually much older than the examples that I have here that go back to 16th century. It's actually something that goes back to ancient Greece, and it is attributed to Aristotle. I don't think it was Aristotle that invented it, but actually it's something that has been running through the ages, and it's actually the art of trying to identify people, and but also attribute things to people, and based on their facial characteristics. And it's about beauty as well, and that falsely was thought as good, and the opposite, something that was indicating like a bad character. So this physiognomy has also inspired criminologists, and quite the very well-known Alphonse Bertillon in France, but also people like Cesare Lombroso in the early 20th century in Italy. And it's something that kind of we see how it might come back today because of the use of artificial intelligence and the use of facial recognition systems, and how many times there is the racial stereotypes that people, because of their facial characteristics, might be criminals. But so this is interestingly coming back today with the use of technologies. So going back to this idea of space and construction of space, and thinking about who is at the front and who is at the back, I wanted to share this plan, which is from it's from a mansion house, from I think Victorian mansion house in Suffolk, and it is you can find it in The Server, which is this book by Markus Krajewski, which is really exciting, and it goes through a history of the server, but thinking about masters and servants, but also from the Baroque, but also to the current age, and thinking about this transition of the servant to what we have today as the server, or something like the behind the scenes in our digital kind of interfaces. And what is really interesting in this plan, you can see that there is the front part, which is composed by the drawing room, the morning rooms, library, etc. So it's the area of the masters, and then all the backspace, which is the area of the servants. And it's very interesting that there is this concealment of the people who run the house, who care about the house, which there is a very clear line of separation, which is like from staircase, but also walls, of course. And I wanted to bring this up because what we see very often now, and I'm sure most people have seen this, this is an image that I took at an airport some time ago, and it is the the counters that have replaced the traditional counters where you see a person to serve you and you give an order. And actually now what happens is that it's all automatic, as we want to believe. So what happens is that the technology has added a layer there by taking out the human element. And we want to think of these as an automated service. And there is a similar kind of case with the food delivery robots. They're not so much common in this country, but they are quite common in the States. And this is by a company that delivers food using these kind of cute machines on the street. But actually what we don't know is that these machines, these bots or mini robots, they are supervised remotely by students in Colombia and who are paid only $2 per hour. So again, like as in the previous pictures, we have this kind of disappearance, this concealment of the person, of the human worker, the carer, who is kind of behind these services like food delivery, but also caring about about our orders, etc. So it's the scenes like that that are the exact opposite of what we think about automation and futurism, and instead remind me of like spaces that we had imagined many years ago, in this case in late 1700s by von Kempelen, who was a very well-known polymath but also inventor, and the person behind the mechanical Turk, which is a very well-known automaton. It says automaton, which was giving the illusion that this kind of model was playing chess against a human, but actually there was a human person who was hidden inside the cupboard that you can see there and was operating the automaton. So, but also it reminds me again, like these kind of early devices of concealment of servants. This is from Monticello, and it was an invention by the third president of the United States, Thomas Jefferson, and it is at his residence at Monticello, where it's actually a rotating door. It's like a self in a rotating door, which was used by the servants, the slave servants, to position the food so that the guests in the dining room would not see them. So these kind of like technologies and automations are so much more similar to these scenes rather than the futuristic movies that we might think of. And what I wanted to where I wanted to go through now is just like, of course, because all of these might sound quite grim, is not that obviously we know there are also amazing ways that people have used and communities have used technological tools. And this is from Sasa Costanza-Czok and their book Design Justice, which is a great toolkit thinking about what design is and what design means, and where they say that actually everybody can design or problem solve, but of course not everybody gets the chance to do that. And I wanted to share a few examples where people of course have created different ways to break through that, and artists and culture is a very good example to kind of think about there. Of course we know of many artists have used their work, but to kind of create platforms to think about these ideas, but also to explore alternative ways of designing things, or like of thinking about who we exclude, or whose lives are affected by the way that we do things. So Gordon Matta Clark's Monumental is an amazing example of, as he was saying, like cutting through architecture that he was kind of thinking as these dominant structures of society, and creating spaces that could enable conversation and and discussion. And then another, a very recent example is Indigemoji, which is a group of indigenous people from Central Australia who wanted to use to express how social media, but also digital platforms are constructed in a very colonial and exclusive way. So they created this group of emojis that was based on extinct languages with young people through workshops, and started like thinking of using these as a different way to kind of occupy these spaces. And forensic architecture, which is the work and this work by Pavlos Fissas, which I'm sure some people have heard of, like the how the neo-Nazi Golden Dawn group in Greece was went through trial recently and found guilty. And this was forensic architecture's investigation of the murder of Pavlos Fissas, who was an anti-fascist rapper who was speaking out against them. And they shared their work. They presented it to the Athens courtroom, and of course helped with the whole procedure. But it's actually, forensic architecture is a group of architects, thinkers, like writers who are based at Goldsmiths University, and they collaborate with different groups and think about investigating human rights violations. And two final examples, because I'm sure I'm running out of time, is by African-American artist Mimi Onuoha. Her work explores missing data sets, or like the voices of people that are missing from collected data sets. And her work is very much inspired by, this work is very much inspired by W.E.B. Du Bois, and in particular his infographics work on African-American life, which is very similar to what happens still today, that we have communities of people that are they are kind of surveilled and over-monitored, but actually they're, when it comes to having their voices heard, then they are totally missing. And just the final example is, again, a recent work by an artist called Paolo Cirio, who created this campaign to ban facial recognition in Europe, and working with citizens, but also with policymakers across Europe, and created this campaign in different countries across the continent. And I think I'm going to close here and stop sharing my screen, because I've run out of time. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much for that, for your talk, Irini. It's absolutely amazing and fascinating to both be propelled into the future on the one hand, and to look back to one of the oldest democracies that we have from the past in Greece. So quite fantastic and amazing. And I'm just going to remind the audience that you can post questions and that I can pose to Irini in the next 20 minutes to half an hour to kick off, and I will be receiving those questions here through my own mobile phone, the wonders of technology. But to start off, I've got a couple of things prepared myself whilst we wait for responses. So in terms of everything that you've presented, both from the past and looking to the present and into the future, and if we think about the problematic ways of thinking, of architecture, of our colonial past, and everything else that you've touched on, how do we avoid reproducing the problematic ways of thinking from the past that aren't fit for the future through the engagement with art and design, for instance, or new ways of thinking?
I guess one thing that we often forget is history as well. So it's again, thinking about education is really important, but also dialogue and conversation. I think we usually think that we invent and innovate all the time without, of course, forgetting that in the past, like, there has been a similar thinking and repetition. That's why I wanted to share this example of like physiognomics and how, with just using technology today, we kind of repeat the same kind of racial stereotypes and mistakes that were happening back then. We just use a different way to do it. So I think it's really important that we have space to look at history and to think about like the context of like how these decisions were being made, and so that we avoid the same thing happening today.
Mm-hmm. I think it makes me feel that sort of interdisciplinarity is hugely important, and I think we see a resurgence of both, obviously, disciplines and expertise within them as being important, but also the ability to be interdisciplinary and to look to other disciplines to bring ideas together. Any thoughts on that, or the artists in particular that you're engaging with?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, that was I forgot to mention that with the example of forensic architecture, for example, is a collective of people who come from different backgrounds and skills. And it's really important. The interdisciplinary approaches are really important in how we work. I mean, it's something that we've been reflecting on at FutureEverything and the work that we've been doing, and thinking that sometimes we do. There is like the risk of running into like a bubble, and if you are only thinking about the arts as in a siloed way, so there is always a need to reach out and bridge links with other disciplines and learn from each other. And of course, it's really important when we are in a society that goes so fast, and we develop in a way that we don't have the time to spend to reflect and think about the decisions that we take and who they affect and why they are taken in that way. Then I think it's really important it's a really important role for artists and culture to kind of have this space in these rooms to present a different perspective.
Mm-hmm. I've got some questions coming in here from our audience. So Finley has said a comment. Finley Clark says it's some really interesting work examples and a very interesting perspective on some of these challenges. So thank you. Annie Runkle has a question. Her question is, my impression is that the pandemic has made many people more aware of the importance of public spaces, both digitally and also offline, such as parks, etc. Do you think this will be a trend for the future?
I think it's definitely, I totally agree that it has made us aware. And one thing that I've been reflecting on and thinking about is also what online space means, and in terms of us being here right now and using a platform like Zoom that is, it's a corporate company. So how our identities and how we are perceived in the online space, we are mainly viewed, I think, less as the individuals and more as consumers. And it's something definitely that we need to reflect on and review, but also the importance of meeting and physical spaces, and what public space means in terms of like what interactions we have in public spaces, what is it used for. So it's something that I feel that it will be coming back, but also we might be redesigning and rethinking how we interact with our physical and virtual spaces from now on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fascinating. I think that leads me, and I can see some more. And Finley's got another question. I'll come to that in 1 second. But just a reflection, I can see different forms of collaboration starting, and I think Nesta have been doing quite a bit of work on collective intelligence. Have you been thinking about that at all?
Yeah, definitely. And it's something that I've been thinking about, like also going back to the term artificial intelligence, which is quite contradictory, right? We're talking about intelligence and artificial on the other side. So it's kind of, it doesn't make sense. But also, yeah, I think the collective intelligence is really interesting, but also thinking beyond humans as well, thinking about other species, thinking about our environment and what intelligence means. And it's not just a human kind of way, right? It's something that other species have as well, and we need to learn from each other. But yeah.
Yeah, okay. I'm going to go back to questions from our audience now. So Finley, who commented earlier on, said, from a design perspective, is it about involving those seldom heard voices, and how can we best represent those voices? So that's from a design perspective. Yes, so the question was about involving. How do we involve the seldom heard voices?
I think again it's about like having a different like thinking into how I don't think there is like a specific answer in terms of like this is how it needs to be done, but we definitely need to have different approaches when we design things. So for example, thinking about impact and like thinking about people and communities that are impacted by decisions that are made by very few people, and how we can open this process in a different way, how we can enable like maybe more input from different people to come in, and especially the ones that are more directly affected. And so definitely we need different methodologies than the traditional way of thinking about design, that it's a small group of people who make the decisions and they have the power to do things a certain way. So because we know that it doesn't work anymore.
And Finley, just actually following on from that, is he poses from a prevention aspect, should there be a kind of reflection or audit of harm when designers create object spaces and systems to look at some of the unintended consequences that can impact on people?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something that we need to dedicate more time, and it's something that I feel that the current pandemic maybe made a bit more evident, this need to reflect and stop for a while, rather instead of kind of rushing to create new things and consume new things, is how do we rethink the process of everything that we've been doing so far.
That's fantastic. Karen Westland has a question. So she says, thank you for the fascinating presentation, Irini. How do you think technology and design help us develop a future that supports intergenerational justice for over 7 billion people worldwide?
Well, that's a very that's a very complicated and big question. I'm glad that you asked that. Again, it is thinking in a from bottom up kind of approach rather than a top down approach. This is why I wanted to share this example of Indie Emoji, and there are so many other examples of amazing communities across the world that they use technology in different ways. And I think we need more great examples like that being shared from these smaller initiatives and communities rather than from large companies. And yes, because there are definitely loads of projects like these, and it's something that, as Sasha was saying in the design justice book, it's something that we all have the power to respond to challenges and to use tools to solve problems and challenges and to create change. I think it's more like, how do we make this more visible, because it's already happening, and how do we create inspirational examples from these kind of small initiatives.
So in effect, I mean, we're sort of seeing the green shoots of change or the realization already out there in society. Are there any particular shows or additional pieces that you could point to that might be of interest to the audience?
I think there are like great examples of people, like for example Joy Bolamini in the States with the Algorithmic Justice League are doing really important work in terms of how like Black people are affected by technologies like facial recognition, but also like what in terms of how emerging technologies might be used in policing, like against these communities. But also there are amazing groups like oh my gosh, I can't remember the name now, but it's in Lebanon or like across, but also in India, that are using kind of they're coming together as collectives so they can take over like land and use it in ways that are like more just and more equal and equitable for these communities. But it's something that we see also with people from like different fields, like from crafts, for example, and maker communities as well, in terms of just examples of, for example, using widely available now tools to create, from prosthetics to anything.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and I've got a few questions coming in, and one of them is the one question that I'm going to ask you towards the end. But I want to reflect, given that we're coming together from an art and design education perspective. It makes me think about what we can be doing in terms of designing our own courses, in redesigning our courses, in reshaping and engaging with some of these problems and opportunities in the future. Where do you think this is going, and how can we kind of move to a better kind of higher education landscape in that regard? Have you got any thoughts on that?
I guess I think it's also in a similar way, thinking about the power of interdisciplinarity again, but also in terms of like, who knowledge and what it means, like knowledge management, and who owns knowledge, but also so thinking of thinking about the going back to that agora kind of, or like stoa image, thinking about this open way of coming together and this exchange that can happen in a more like transparent way from what we've been thinking, because we're not inventing anything new in a way. We are kind of we are constantly kind of going, or everything that we do is informed by things that have happened already. So it's kind of thinking a little bit again about the past and history, but also how what we've learned so far can inform like alternative ways of working in the future.
It's going to be really interesting, I think, this is a comment from myself, and Ross has got a comment coming in, a question coming in, but it's going to be interesting from my perspective when we think about we have been seeing a movement in art schools towards very open collaborative spaces, hot desking. If we think about MMU's new building, Manchester Met's new art school, and there's been a lot of talk around Dundee having a new art school and what we might imagine that will be. But the flip to that is, of course, the situation we find ourselves in now, where we're actually having open collaborative spaces is sort of problematic, and it'll be interesting to see where architecture goes with that, or how we may be affected, and it's a bit of a paradox, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And also thinking about how collaboration might be enabled in online spaces, because it's something that we've been coming across as well. A lot of examples that we had of these encounters that you get with anyone, with people on the street, when we have events like public events. This cannot happen online. It's completely different, the way that things are created or like that happen online. It's a bit more structured in a way. So definitely it's going to be a challenge, and thinking about how we might able to navigate that is also an interesting kind of problem to have right now. Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm just moving to a couple more questions from the audience. Ross says, "Hi, wondering how you came across research for the internet platforms and the colonial approaches having an exclusion effect of other demographics globally regarding our emojis and how we can change." So he's asking if you've come across research on the types of maybe the way emojis are designed and how we can change that with reference to colonialism.
Well, there is. I know that there are different groups that are kind of that are working on of course emojis and pushing different emojis, because we know that emojis have been changing the last few years in terms of course skin color, but also different ideas. But I thought this was a really interesting and quite radical way of thinking about emojis, because what this community did was that they ran this project through many workshops with groups across the country, and it was a long-term project that is, again, I find that is not obviously it's not a mainstream project. Is kind of, I think they're still fighting for a space, and it's something that it doesn't mean that they are out there, they've done that work, that it is recognized or acknowledged. So it kind of makes you realize how these spaces, how these digital spaces are kind of guarded in a way, and it's so difficult to break into and to help people understand that actually there is, it's not, this is a very Western way of thinking these structures. There is a whole kind of world out there that has been doing really interesting work. And so where does that fit in terms of language, in terms of interactions online, in terms of how we encounters, etc. And also Mozilla Foundation has been doing really interesting work with communities across the globe in regards to access and language online, but also in terms of what we mean by a healthy and open web, because it's not the fact that it might seem open and accessible to us, it doesn't mean that it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Mozilla has also got its new internet health report that'll be coming out, if it's not already, very, very soon, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, and that's definitely worth looking at. I think we're coming to the end. So if anybody has any remaining questions, if you can whiz those over to me quite quickly. Another one question I had was around artists' manifestos and the role that they've played in the past in galvanizing in provoking and galvanizing and collectives in presenting I suppose a goal, sometimes unattainable. But do you think the Artist Manifesto has a role now in this new space going forward?
I think, yeah, definitely. I mean, sometimes I'm wondering if manifesto might be the best way to describe something, but yeah, definitely. And it's still, I think it's still, there are still many artistic communities and collectives that create these kind of resources and toolkits that we can use to kind of reassess things and to rethink of different challenges. So yeah, I mean, I also want to think of some publications that have come out, like the Design Justice, but also the work Data Feminism that is quite recent, as well as resources and toolkits, that because they are these powerful kind of tools that you can use to think differently about ideas such as data science in this case, or thinking about design, and in the case of Design Justice, but also you reminded me of Pirate Care as well, which is this other really interesting collective that talk about aesthetics of care and maintenance as well, and repair. And it's a really powerful and really interesting work. And on the online, like, kind of space that they have, one can find resources and some sort of a manifesto as well, in terms of like how do we create like a society of care and maintenance as well. And it's highly recommended as well.
Mm-hmm. So those are actions everybody can take on leaving here today, is to pick up on some of these resources, and maybe what we can do is circulate some of those links that you've talked about just now. I think that will be incredibly useful for our community. So sort of to wrap, to wrap things up, I wondered if you wanted to share anything new or any new opportunities that are coming out of FutureEverything at this time that that people that are watching the broadcast tonight might be able to plug into.
Yes, definitely. Yes. And during the pandemic, we actually, as everybody else, we were also affected, and many of our programs were put on hold. And we decided to create a new platform, a program called Future Focus, which was first kind of helping us to reflect on our place and position and work as an arts organization, but also it's a platform that we are going to keep as an ongoing project, where we can bring people together to talk about how art and culture and humanities can help us think and navigate the world at times of crisis. So we did a series of events since May, thinking about like hacking spaces, thinking about maker communities, thinking about collaboration as well, and artistic practices. But also we are going to restart this program in November with a new series, and also there is on our website more information and an invitation for anyone who wants to approach to get in touch with us, if they are interested to get involved, or if they have any ideas to share or the work to share in future sessions. So they are very welcome to do so.
Fantastic. Well, thank you ever so much, Irini. Everybody in the back channel here is saying that was absolutely fantastic and great conversation. Thank you to all, and thank you to our audience for posing questions to Irini this evening. I think it just remains for me to say good night, and to anything further you'd like to say before we wrap up, Irini?
Yeah, just a big thank you to you, Mel, and also Maria for inviting me, and everyone who's been listening as well.
Okay, thank you very much, and have a lovely evening, everybody. Thank you.